and the nature of our lives. During this coronavirus pandemic, you, Bruce, are providing insight into our immune system, the effects of the mainstream media, and how people can protect themselves. Bruce, welcome back to London Real.
I am so honored to be here with you guys because there's a bright light coming out of the world and it's coming from your studio. And so thank you for helping people on this planet.
Our pleasure, Bruce. You know, I still think back to that time you came to our studio about 2.5 years ago, and you just honestly dropped science on people, quite literally. And, you know, at 2 million views, you are the guy that for that following year, people stopped me and said, tell me more about Bruce Lipton. So you were a pivotal part of London Real getting more mainstream, and it was an amazing episode. And it's honestly, people have taken clips of that thing and it's probably been watched another 10 or 20 million times. So Bruce, thanks for that. It was really epic that day.
Thank you.
So you're in New Zealand, and I thought we would just jump into talking about what's happening right now, because, you know, we are in the middle of London, a very probably different scene from New Zealand when it comes to the effects of the coronavirus. We're basically on lockdown. Our prime minister is in intensive care. We don't know how long it's going to be. You are in a place where I think there's fewer cases. What's going on with the coronavirus? You're an expert in the immune system. Maybe you can bring us up to speed with what you see, Bruce.
Yeah, well, let's start with the first understanding is that flu season comes every year. And I say, why is it related to the winter time? And it's an important reason to understand that the viruses that cause the flu generally function better at lower than body temperature. So when we start breathing cold air in the winter, the respiratory tract gets cooler because of the cold temperature than the rest of the body. Well, this makes these cells in the respiratory system pretty prime for a viral infection, especially that works at lower temperatures. So flu seasons come when winter shows up, and then when winter goes away, the flu season disappears because that's not the best environment. So we're facing a flu. Now the issue is this. Is it a flu? The answer, it is a flu. They want to make it so special, like, oh, it's not a flu. It's more than a flu. It's a flu. Period. That's what it's about, okay? And the relevance about that is every year we have flu season. It's every year. And I go and I say, what about it? And I say every year, about 0.1% of the population will die from the annual flu every year. So why is it so different this year than in previous years? And the significance is this. The flus that come every year are really from the same types of viruses, and that previous year's flu will mutate and then show up in the next year because it's bypassed the immune system. But the point about it is this, there's an immunological memory of parts of all the different flu viruses that we've had for decades. And so when we have a regular flu, the immune system can fight it, and most people end up with coughing, sneezing, you know, mild fever. That's the standard thing. When the immune system is working, it will easily cover it. I had a cold. That's basically what I'm saying. I say, so what's so different about this year? And I say, the virus hasn't been around for years and years. It's relatively newly introduced into the human population. So most humans do not have an immunological memory to help alleviate the symptoms of the flu. So this year, the flu is a little more aggressive than previous years, only because most of us have not had an experience with this virus in the past. That's the nature of the game. So then I say, well, how dangerous is this flu? Well, this is the part that is really freaky, because the first thing is this, we equate the flu this season, the Corona 2019 virus, we equate it with mortality. It's like, what do you mean? I said, everyone's talking about, oh my God, we can die. And I go, well, you can die every year. That's not even different. I say, so what's different? I said, it's a little more aggressive. I say, so why is it relevant? I said, okay, the symptoms are a little more aggressive. I said, well, you die from the symptoms. I say, if you have standard medical treatment, even the aggressive form that causes respiratory distress is manageable. As long as we have ventilators, as long as we have antivirals, as long as the hospital isn't under a crush, this isn't lethal. I said, yeah, but people are dying. I go, every year, the same cohort or group of people are affected and die from the flu. And I said, what cohort is that? And I said, people who, first of all, are very old, who are in nursing care, whose immune systems are already weakened just because of their age. And secondly, those people who are already compromised. They have a problem already, whether it's a cardiovascular or cancer or diabetes, they already are compromised. These are the people who are the likely ones to succumb from this particular flu. They've always been this way. Every year, 0.1% to about 0.5% is a range. And I say, well, what about this year? And they go, oh my God, 3 to 4%, which is like 30 or 40 times more lethal. I go, wait a minute, where'd you get that statistic? The way you get the statistic is you take the number of people who died and divide it by the number of people who have the virus. I go, okay. So I said, well, what's wrong here? And I'll tell you what's wrong is when they've tested like a whole city, like in Italy, in Vo, Italy, for example, they tested the population and they found that more than half of the people that have the so-called COVID-19 virus, more than half of them have no symptoms at all. I say, so why is that relevant? I say, if you take all the people who have the virus, whether they have no symptoms or whether they have symptoms, that's a very large number compared to the number of people who went to the doctor and got reported to have a virus. So I say, why is it relevant? I say, if you take the very large number of people who have been exposed and who have that virus, and then divide that into the number of deaths, guess what? It's not 3 to 4% at all. It's below 1%. I go, well, now you're in the range of a normal flu. And I go, well, yeah, exactly. But the fear that has been generated by this is the biggest problem of all, because people have to understand about the immune system. The immune system is designed for internal protection. Anything that gets in my body, parasites, viruses, bacteria, the immune system's function is to fight that. And I say, does it use energy to have the immune system? I go, of course. If you've ever been really sick, you probably didn't have enough energy to get out of bed sometimes. I say, the immune system uses lots of energy. I go, so what? Well, then here comes the problem. There are two protection systems. The immune system protects me on the inside. The adrenal system, which is called fight or flight, protects me from threats on the outside. I go, so why is it relevant? Well, let's give a scenario here. You have a bacterial infection. You might have a bad case of diarrhea coming, and you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Question, if I had to divide the energy in my body to protect me from the flu or bacteria and from the tiger, how would you split the energy distribution between those two? And Brian, this is really relevant. I mean, ask you, if you're being chased by a tiger, you got a flu, what proportion of the energy of your body do you want to use to run away from the tiger? And what proportion do you want to use to fight the bacteria? It's a pretty clear answer. I hope you see it.
Probably 99 to 1 is probably what I would do.
Exactly. So right away, that's the fundamental principle. Fundamental principle is this. I distribute energy in the body where I need the energy. And when it comes to threats and survival, if it's a threat from the outside world, I need to put all the energy into that. So I say, fine. I say, how does this work? I say, when we perceive a threat, when we believe and perceive that we're being chased by that saber-toothed tiger, the body releases stress hormones. I go, yeah, so what? That gets me ready. I say, gets you ready for fight or flight. I said, what does it do to get you ready? And this is the crux of the problem. The stress hormones do is take the energy of the body, stop funding with energy those functions that are not necessary to run away from the tiger. Because what you want to do is you want to get all the energy possible into the arms and legs, which is the blood. The blood carries the energy. I want all the blood in my arms and legs. Why? Because I need to run away from that tiger. So I say, so what happens when stress hormones are released in the body? And the first thing is this, all functions not related to running away from that tiger are shut down to conserve the energy. So I say, well, what does that mean? I say, when stress hormones are released into the body, they cause the blood vessels in the gut to squeeze shut. I go, why? And the answer is, if the blood vessels squeeze shut, then the blood is pushed to the periphery, the arms and legs. So the blood is in scientific terms, preferentially sent to the arms and legs at the expense of what? Shutting the blood vessels in the gut. And that's when people get butterflies in the stomach. When they start to get scared, they can feel a little queasy going on. And I say, what is that? I say, that's the action of stress hormones causing your blood vessels in the gut to squeeze shut, so you push the blood to the arms and legs to deal with fight or flight. Okay, so the first thing is this. When you're in fear, you shut down the growth and maintenance of the body. It's very simple. Why should I fund those things if the tiger's chasing me? If the tiger catches me, then maintenance of the body is not my problem anymore. So the first step in a stress response is stress hormones shut down the visceral functions of maintaining the body, filtering, cleaning, repairing, replacing things. I go, okay, that shuts down my growth as I get ready for protection. I go, yeah. And here's the other fact, and this is the one that's relevant. The immune system, as I said, uses so much energy that when it's engaged, we may be so depleted of energy, we don't have any energy to get out of bed. I say, well, again, if I'm being chased by the tiger and I have the bacterial infections, the hell with the bacterial infections. It's time to run away from that tiger. Fact of life, this is it. Stress hormones shut down the immune system to conserve energy so I can run away from the threat. And I go, it's so powerful at shutting down the immune system that stress hormones are used, listen, therapeutically. I go, what do you mean? If I am going to transplant an organ from one person to another, the recipient of that transplant, their immune system, by definition, is going to try and reject the transplant because it's foreign tissue. I say, so what do doctors do before they transplant an organ? I say, they give the patient stress hormones, because when they get the stress hormones, it inhibits the immune function from rejecting the graft. So what's the point? My God, stress hormones are so effective at shutting down the immune system that they use it therapeutically to stop the function of that immune system. So I go, so why is it relevant? I go, because we're put into fear, and everybody who listens is now afraid. The difference between, let's say, last year's flu season, I'm coming on the news and I go, the flu season's back this year, and as usual, you have to take care of yourself, and about 0.1% of the population will have severe problems with this, but that's annual. That's the way it is. Or I come on this year and I say, my God, the flu is here. We're all going to die. Millions of people are going to die. And all of a sudden, it's like, that's a different news report than last year. That scares the hell out of me. And now I'm afraid.
And why fear in this particular case? Is it the way it emerged? Is this one actually more contagious? Is that what happened? Or is it just an anomaly that fear came with this flu? What made this happen?
You're going to put me on an edge here, because I can talk about the natural reason. If the flu is coming, we want to have people take care of themselves. But with the idea of attaching to that flu a fear of rampant death, that changes me from last year, like, oh, I can get the flu. I get the flu every year. I cough, I sneeze, I'm okay. Everything's great. This year, oh my God, if I get the flu, I'm going to die. Well, all of a sudden I go, that is a profound change on the physiology of any listener who listens to that. So they want to help us, they say, and I go, the way they're helping us is making things worse. They're throwing gasoline onto the fire with the way we're dealing with this.
So that fear response is making it worse, and that's what you see when you look at this thing from all of your years of study and understanding epigenetics and the immune system. You see something that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, a positive feedback loop, as we see in science, where it's just exacerbating the problem and creating the problem. And it started off with a little fear here, and now it's spread. The fear is spread like a virus, and then the virus is spread like a virus.
Absolutely. So the fear feeds the virus. That's what feeds a virus, because let me just, again, the immune system's job is to allocate that energy from running away. So let's look at it historically. You say, wow, that's really detrimental to the system if the stress hormones are going to shut down growth and they're going to shut down the immune system. Well, that's a terrible design. And I go, when the system was designed, the only fears that we had was to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. Once you run away from that tiger, there's no more fear. I go, so fear was only used for a very short interval of escape. And I say, and what about today? I go, today fear is 24/7, 365. The system was never designed for prolonged fear and stress as we are experiencing in today's world. And therefore, we have thrown this thing so out of balance just because the concept of the fear is all it takes to shut down the immune system.
Wow. So this was destined to happen with all of these mobile phones buzzing in our legs that put us in fear of things around the world that we can't control. Was it a matter of time before that exacerbated with the right or wrong flu virus that maybe this was going to happen?
Well, I have a feeling that the fear is much more powerful in influencing us than the things like the cell phones and the energy fields and all that. You know, let's go back, because a big fear is, electromagnetic fields. That's been a big fear, and there should be a concern, because biological systems employ electromagnetic fields and vibrations and energy in controlling and manipulating the biology. So if the energy fields around us are altered, they surely can have an effect. And I say, well, is everybody affected by this? And I say, look, when we were afraid because high power, high tension lines, the ones that carry the big load of electricity, and people live underneath those lines, they assessed, is there any difference in the health of people who live under the high power tension lines? And they find out, yeah, for sure, people are affected. You got, more health issues of people living there. And then I go, is everybody affected? And this is where it comes down to the important part. No, not everybody was affected. Those that were affected were already under stress. So stress exacerbated the problem. Those people who weren't under stress, living under these lines, have no problem. So stress is opening up our system from attack, from anything from electromagnetic fields to viruses. And we have to understand that stress is the bigger problem in the immune system.
Okay, now, how do we deal with that stress? That's the big question. And I know you've written a book about this, but also now we're in these strange times as well, that our stress has been exacerbated, not just by the news, but the lockdown and even more. So what's your advice to people?
Well, the first straightforward advice is this: we have to maintain our physiology and our health. And so basically I say, well, how do you do that? And I go, it's not that difficult. The number one thing is this: first of all, eat food that is good for you, not industrial farm, but organic, natural, healthy food. Industrial farm food is loaded with chemicals that influence our system in a very negative way. All you have to do is look at a farmer out there in those industrial farms spraying the crops. They're all wearing hazard suits. I go, my God, they're spraying my food and they can't be in the field with the spray because it's toxic, and they're putting it on the food. There's something to think about in that picture right there. So taking care of your nutrition, number one, is important because we nourish our cells. And if you shorten the supply of nourishment, of course, you're going to be open to sickness. Number two is to take advantage of vitamins and supplements and things to support us, because our food isn't that great. Anything we can do outside to enhance our immune system, and let me just add, especially vitamin C. When we support ourselves that way, we strengthen the immune system. And then third thing is watch what you're thinking. Because the moment you are thinking of stressful things like, oh my God, I'm not working for weeks, and my job, my salary, do I have any money? Fear comes from that. Can I pay the rent? Fear comes from that. Am I going to die? Of course, fear comes from that. And I go, these fears are the primary things that inhibit the function of the immune system. You want to stay well? Norman Cousins, who healed himself from a lethal disease, healed himself by what? He locked himself in a hotel room and got all kinds of comedies, Marx Brothers and things like that. And what did he do? He just sat there and enjoyed life and laughed and did all that. And he overcame an illness that should have killed him. This is an example of what is so important. If we do not focus on the problems that they keep throwing at us, and you start to look at your life and say, am I okay? Yeah, I'm pretty good. How's my family? We're good. We're healthy. Even if there's a flu, as I said, half the people tested with the flu don't even have symptoms. So it's not as lethal as they say. It's the fear of death is the problem that we must deal with today. And the idea is, am I open to die? And I say, everybody's open to die. But will you die from this flu? I go, not necessarily unless you're part of that same group. So let me just emphasize, the group that should be concerned are the aged people, very old, people on support, like nursing support, like especially in nursing homes, people whose immune system is already compromised. If you are in that situation, then by all means, do everything to protect yourself. Isolate from those people that may be carrying it. And remember, a lot of carriers have no symptoms, so you wouldn't even know they were carrying it. And follow the guidelines of eating well, vitamins, supplements, and thinking in a different way, more specifically for that group than for the rest, because that's the group that is primarily affected by this. Then I say, yeah, but there's a lot of respiratory distress. And I go, again, all of that is manageable if you can get hospital care. If you can get a ventilator, if you can get some antiviral drugs and the medical system, people won't die from this if they get care. So basically, it's not, oh my God, I got the flu, I'm gonna die. We got to change that visual picture, because that is the biggest problem affecting us today, is the fear.
Now, you didn't always feel this way. You had your early medical training, I'm guessing, that your mentality and your belief in your consciousness could affect your physiology. And then you had kind of a realization that maybe it could. Am I getting that narrative correctly? And how do the rest of your colleagues in the medicine profession respond to your idea?
Well, when did I do this research? It was 1967, so that was, 50 some years ago. I was cloning stem cells. So let's just briefly, what the heck is a stem cell? And here's the point. A human body is comprised of 50 trillion cells. When we look at ourselves in the mirror and say there's a single entity, I go, no, that's an illusion. A human is a community of 50 trillion cells. The cells are the living entity. And I say, so what? I say every day in a normal body, every day, hundreds of billions of cells die every day. Just in the time we've been talking, 100 million cells probably have died. Hair cells, skin cells, blood cells. I go, yeah, but what does that mean? I say, well, if you don't replace those cells, you're going to die. I say, well, if you're watching this show and you're here, the first thing is this. Obviously, something's replacing your dying cells every day, or you wouldn't be here. And I go, well, what is it? I say, in our body, we have embryonic cells. They're the same embryonic cells we had when we were in the womb. And they're still in our body. I say, what's their function? I say, well, we changed the name. That's the scary part, because all of a sudden now I got a new topic. I said, embryonic cells, of course. Embryonic cells are going to replace everything, and I call them stem cells. Oh my God, what the heck are the stem cells? I say, an embryonic cell. It's just that after you're born, I can't call it an embryonic cell because you're not an embryo, so we changed. But a stem cell is an embryonic cell. It replaces the cells that die every day. And if you're alive, don't worry if you have stem cells, because obviously if you're here, you do have stem cells. So I grow stem cells in a tissue culture 50 years ago, embryonic cells. I clone them. What does that mean? I take one cell, put it in the dish all by itself. And every 10 hours it divides. So first there's one cell, then there's two, then there's four, then there's eight, then doubles and doubles and doubles. And after a week, I've got 30,000 cells in the petri dish from one parent. What's the point? I have 30,000 genetically identical cells. They all came from the same parent. So 30,000 genetically identical cells. I split them into 3 dishes. Each dish has, they're all the same genetically identical cells. I say, what's different? I changed the culture medium chemistry. Now all of a sudden this is where it connects. They go, so what's culture medium? I say, that's the environment in which I grow cells. I say, yeah, but what does it represent? It represents blood. So if I grow human cells, I look at what is in human blood and make culture medium based on that. If I grow mouse cells, I say, what's in mouse blood, and make culture medium on that. But since I'm making the culture medium in the lab, I can change some of the composition. I make 3 different versions of culture medium. I change the chemistry a little tiny bit. And I feed each of the dishes a different version. So I have 3 dishes, genetically identical cells in all of them, but each dish has a different culture medium environment. That's another word. I go, what's the relevance? In one culture medium, the cells form muscle. In the second culture medium, my stem cells form bone. In the third culture medium, my stem cells form fat cells. I go, wait a minute. This is 50 years ago, and I'm teaching students about genes controlling life. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at this culture study, and there's a very clear understanding. They were all genetically identical, but they had different fates. So I said, well, what controlled the fate? I go, the only thing that was different was the chemistry of the culture medium. I go, yes, the genetics wasn't controlled, the expression of the cell wasn't controlled by the genes in the cell. The cell was responding to the environment. And as I changed the environment, I changed the fate of the cells. And I said, wow, when I did that, those experiments 50 years ago, my colleagues looked at me and they thought, well, that's an artifact or something. Why? Because we were all teaching, and even I was teaching, genes control life. And my tissue culture studies say, no, the genes didn't control the fate of the cells. It was the culture medium. The environment controlled genes. And they, I got alienated more or less because they kept saying, oh, that's an artifact. I said, this is reproducible every day. I can tell you, when I put the cells in the culture today, I can tell you what's going to exactly happen in 3 days. And that's what makes real science, is repetition. I could predict the future, meaning I knew something, but it was the big rush on gains, so it was marginalized. And I left that situation, and actually I left the university. I had tenure and walked out because I couldn't, in good conscience, go into a classroom and teach students that genes control life when it is totally false. So now let's make this into why this is relevant to us as humans instead of cells in a plastic dish. First thing I said was, the human body's got 50 trillion cells in it. The cells are the living entity, so what's the point? A human body is a skin-covered petri dish with 50 trillion cells. And I go, yeah, and I say, and there's a culture medium, the original culture medium, blood. And I say, so what's the point? I said, it didn't make a difference if the cell's in a plastic dish or the cell's in the skin-covered dish. I don't care where the cell is. The cell responds to the environment, which is the culture medium in the plastic dish or the blood in the human dish. And I go, why is it relevant? The chemistry of the blood is controlling the fate of your cells. I go, so why is it relevant? And then all of a sudden you start to recognize this, is that if I change the chemistry of the blood, I change the fate of the cells. I go, yeah, that's what the lab experiments show. Different environments, different fate. Then we're coming to a conclusion on this. Hold on one second. Here it is. The conclusion is this. The cells in my body are in a skin-covered petri dish. They're responding to the chemistry of the blood, which is the culture medium, which determines their fate. And then all of a sudden, the most important question, there's two. Who's the chemist? In the lab, I made the culture medium, but in your body, who's the chemist that puts the chemistry into that blood? The answer is the brain is the chemist. And then comes the most important question of all. What chemicals should the brain put into the blood? Because if you change the chemicals, you change the fate of the cells. So here's the answer. Whatever picture you hold in your mind, the brain translates that picture into chemistry that complements that picture and puts that chemistry in the blood, and the body responds to the picture in your mind. I go, why is that relevant? I said, I can have a picture of health, or I can have a picture of fear. I say, well, that's different chemistry. When you're in love, the brain releases love chemistry, which is like dopamine, pleasure. That's why falling in love, oh, it's so great, it's pleasure. It also releases oxytocin, which bonds you to the source of your love. It releases another chemical, vasopressin, that makes you more attractive to your partner, so that your biology is now, advertising, I'm a healthy, happy person, vasopressin. But the big one is this. Growth hormone is released into the blood when you're in love. I go, so why is it relevant? I say, and tell me what is the consequence of a picture of love? I said, the chemistry of the body provides extreme health. That's why people, when they fall in love, they glow, they're so healthy, and everything's like, oh my God, I love my life. I go, that's chemistry, okay? Now let's just give today's chemistry in fear. I say, well, what's the chemistry that comes out in fear? I go, oh, none of that love chemistry is coming out here. A picture of fear in my mind causes stress hormones, cortisol, things like that, and factors that shut down the immune system. They're called cytokines. And so the blood of a person in love has a different chemistry than the blood of a person in fear. And the thing that people have to understand is this is like, now comes the critical moment of what? I say, a cell can be in growth, or a cell can be in protection, but a cell can't be in both at the same time. I go, what do you mean? I say, growth, I move to a stimulus, like someone I love or something I like, I move to it, and I'm open. I take it in. Love, I want to be open. I want to assimilate it. Joy, I want it open. I want to take it in. And I say, so growth is going to a stimulus, open. I say, what about protection? I go, if there's a stimulus out there that you are in fear of, you don't go to the stimulus, you go away from the stimulus. I say, do you stay open? I say, absolutely not. You close yourself down to protect yourself. So I say, what's the point? Growth, you move to the stimulus. Fear, you move away from the stimulus. Growth, you stay open to take it in. Fear, you close yourself down to protect it. And I go, oh my God, you can't do both of those at the same time. And all of a sudden you start to realize our biology is now based on whether we're open to be in love or we're closed because we're in fear. And I say, well, here we are today, ladies and gentlemen. This is the state of fear that is compromising not just your growth and maintenance of your body, but it's shutting off your immune system, opening us to disease. And this is the biggest problem that we have to face is, what is your consciousness? Because your consciousness is going to control the fate of your biology. And then you go, wow, I go, that's the new science of epigenetics, number one. But let me add this, Brian, because this is, I think, the most important fact, and it's really hard for people to take this fact in, but it's a fact of science. And that is this. The most valid science on planet Earth is called quantum physics. There is no science that has been tested more, affirmed more, proven to be more truthful than quantum physics, the most truthful science on the planet. So if you're going to question a science, the last one you will question is quantum physics. I go, so what's relevant? The first principle of quantum physics is consciousness is creating your life experience. The biology we just talked about is the interface of how consciousness controls the chemistry from the brain, which controls your life experiences, your genetics, your behavior, and the character of your life. And I say, why is it relevant? Because the first principle, as a fact, is we are creating our life experiences with our consciousness. And then the question is, where are you getting your consciousness from? What information are you putting in there? Because that information will be translated directly into your biology. And all of a sudden I say, well, we're sure as heck not given, hey, things are okay. We're being told we're all gonna die. And I go, whoa, put that picture in your mind and let me know what kind of chemistry is coming out of your brain. Well, I can tell you stress hormones and cytokines. And this is where the problem is coming from.
But the outcome, when I go to my doctor, I go to the hospital, I don't hear this. I never hear it. It's all about chemistry and biology. No one would ever dare say that my healing visualization in my life is affecting my life.
Well, basically we're dealing with, I taught in a medical school, so I have an insight a little bit on the nature of medicine. And the nature of medicine is you stick with a theory until it's absolutely dead. And the theory that germs cause this problem and we're going to blame the germs has been there for a couple hundred years now at this point. But the reality is epigenetics is a new science. It's from 1990. Is it in the medical school curriculum? Only within the last couple of years. So I say any doctor who got trained previous to 2 years ago or so has very little, if any, information about epigenetics. I go, it's a revolution. Genetics means genes control the character of your life. Epigenetics is the environment controls the genes. If the genes control your life, that belief system, then by definition, we become victims of our heredity. Oh my God, there's a cancer gene in my family and I'm gonna get the cancer. Or cardiovascular, my father died when he was 49, my grandfather died when he was 51. Oh my God, I have those genes, I'm gonna die at 50. And I go, these are belief systems, of course. and we attribute them to genetics. And now the new science, epigenetics, say, no, this is completely false, that the environment and our consciousness is controlling this. And I say, why is it relevant? Well, if you want to change your biology, then change your consciousness. You don't have to change your genes. The genes aren't in control. With every gene you have in your body, a gene is a blueprint to make a protein. The proteins are the building blocks. So the character of your body in a physical sense is controlled by the blueprints, the genes that make the proteins. I go, so this is a number that it will blow your mind, and that is this. For every gene blueprint in your body, I can make over 3,000 different versions of the protein from the same blueprint based on the way I respond to life. And all of a sudden I say, then am I a direct readout of my genes? I go, no. You could be born with mutant genes and cover it up, or you can be born with healthy genes and get cancer. The genes are just the blueprints. How you use the blueprints and how they're going to function is not based on the genes. It's based on the consciousness, which is now supported by quantum physics and epigenetics. They both say the same thing. So the new biology is not in the medical arena for most physicians because they are not programmed with that new science. And I really have to acknowledge, listen, having taught medical students for years, they're like snapping turtles that once they grab onto that belief system, that's going to be there the rest of their lives because that's what we selected. People who can take all that information in medical school and download it and have a compendium of knowledge. It's resistant to change. And so is there a change? I go, absolutely. Does your physician know about it? If you hadn't been in school in the last few years, probably not. I'm going, well, the revolution is, am I controlled by my genes or do I control my genes? The difference is now that we know we control our genes, and all of a sudden, instead of being victims of our heredity, by definition, we are masters of our heredity because our consciousness can take any gene and make any kind of copy out of it, a copy that gives me health from the gene blueprint, or based on how I perceive the world and I'm not happy or I'm stressed out, I can make a protein that will take away my health. Cancer, everyone says, oh, cancer genes. Let me give you a fact. There's not one gene that causes cancer. There's no such thing as a gene that causes cancer. Genes are correlated with cancer, but they don't cause it. If you're not living in harmony, a so-called oncogene could be engaged, which will make things worse. But if you're living in harmony, there is no gene that is going to take that harmony and make cancer. Cancer has a lot to do with the psychology, the programming, the experiences of an individual. And so just to give an example, they followed the fate of children who were adopted into families where there's cancer. I say, so what? I say, it turns out the adopted child will get the same family cancer as the siblings get with the same probability. I go, yeah, but what's different? I go, the adopted child came from totally different genetics, and the cancer is running in the family. And what's the point? Cancer is not due to genes. Cancer is due to not living in harmony. And all of a sudden it says, well, then how do you fight cancer? And they say, well, we kill all the cancer cells. I go, the cancer cells are a symptom. The problem is not living in harmony. You can kill all the damn cancer cells you want, but if you don't change the problem, the cause, the cancer will come back again. And so there's a misunderstanding about genes and victimization. We're all perceived as victims of our heredity when we are absolute masters. We control our genetics, and that's the most important fact that people have to understand.
Well, I think we were pounded into our heads this whole concept of genetics or everything. I remember, doing the charts of the blue eyes and the brown eyes. I remember the fruit flies when I was in high school, and even subconsciously, I think, Bruce, you adopt this, my physical state is determined by the and I think we don't even talk about it sometimes, but it's like almost like our society is constructed by this assumption, even though we don't consciously say it out loud. And so you kind of have this mindset. Then you have companies like 23andMe, and I got friends of mine that are looking at their DNA and they're saying, oh, look, I'm more susceptible to this, and this tells me I'm this, and I'm just like, why don't you live your life? This is crazy. you know, I mean, does that boggle your mind too? That people are so
Oh my
fascinated by
God,
these?
it bothers the hell out of me, Brian, because I'm disempowering people. I'm saying, here's the story, live with it. I go, but your story is wrong. Yeah, but you want me to live with it, then I'm not living in the harmony of life. And I think it's an important point to bring up here, Brian, is that we talk about the mind controlling biology. I go, yeah, the mind. But then I have to say, when we say the mind, it sounds like there's this one thing, a thing called the mind, and that controls me. I go, no, there are two parts to the mind. They're interdependent, meaning each part to the mind has a different function and learns in a different way. And I go, well, what are they? And I said, well, we're familiar with the word conscious mind versus subconscious mind. And I say, well, what is subconscious? I say, sub means below. And so I say, there's a mind in our brain that controls functions below our awareness. Your heart rate, your digestion, your breathing, the pH of your blood. I say, yeah, these are not controlled by consciousness, but it also turns out the subconsciousness learns programs. And so therefore, there are programs that are downloaded into the subconscious. This is a very good point to bring up right now. It refers back to the virus, okay? What is a virus? I need to bring this in, then we'll come back. And I say a virus is a structure that conveys information to a recipient cell. I say, well, oh, now that's complicated. What am I talking about? So let's simplify it. I have a memory stick for a computer, and that memory stick has programs in it. And if I plug that memory stick into the computer, it will download the programs, and if the programs are virally infected, nice word, the programs will infect your operating system, and in the process, distort the function of the system. That's why, oh, we're clearing viruses out of the computer. I say, what is a virus? It's information that went into the program. So what is a virus in biology? It's a memory stick that plugs into a cell and deposits a piece of programming that will take over the programming of the cell. I go, is the virus alive? I say, it's no more alive than a memory stick for a computer. It's exactly what it is. There's no life to it. It doesn't breathe. It doesn't have metabolism. It is a capsule with a program inside, and the surface of this capsule binds to specific cells, injects the program just like a memory stick, sticks the program into the computer. Is the virus alive? No. It has no character of life at all. It's just a memory stick. I say, well, how can I interfere with it? I say, well, if you can block some of the chemistry on that virus, it'll prevent it from binding to your cells. So I say, oh, well, that's how we can stop a virus, by altering the chemistry of the virus. It's not, I'm killing a virus. You can't kill a virus. It was never alive in the first place. It's a memory stick. So I say, so what is this nature? And I go, let's go back to the mind. There's a simple fact, and people get it. It's like, okay, here's the fact. The brain is like a computer. Absolutely. We've been always talking about the brain as a supercomputer. I go, yes, it is. I say, like a computer, what is it? What's the character? And I go, you go to the store, you buy a brand new computer. You take it home. I say, you push the start button, it boots up. It's ready to go. I say, a child's brain, as a computer, by the last trimester of pregnancy, it boots up. The brain is booting up. The function of a computer brain is booting up. And I say, okay, go back to the store. I just bought this new computer, open the store. I push start, it boots up. And now I say, do something. You go, what do you mean? I said, well, do a drawing or do a word process or something like that. And they go, oh, I can't do that. I say, why not? Because I didn't put any programs into the computer. So when I get a brand new computer, what do I do first? I stick programs into it. I say, why? Because now when I boot it up, the programs are engaged and I can use them. So I say, guess what? Child's brain is a computer. In the last trimester, it's operational to the extent that it boots up. So I say, you cannot use that computer until you put programs in it. I say, oh. I say, when does that occur? From the last trimester of pregnancy through age 7. The brain is not operating at the higher vibration of consciousness. That's when you put wires on a person's head, EEG, read their vibration. The brain is operating lower than consciousness. It's a vibration called theta. I say, what does that represent? I said, hypnosis. I go, why is that relevant? The answer is, how do I put a program in? Ask a most important question. An infant has to become a member of a family and a member of a community. And I say, yeah, there are a lot of rules. You can't just make up your own rules. We can form. So I said, well, how do I know what the rules are? I said, you don't give an infant a book and say, okay, study the rules. So now you can be a member of the family and the community. I say, that's obviously silly. I say, but then how does a child learn the rules? I go, the brain is in a state of hypnosis through age 7. Whatever the child sees and hears and experiences, it's a download, straight download. That's where the programs come from. You watch your mother, you watch your father, you watch your siblings, you watch your community. As you're watching, the brain is like a video recorder. It's taking in all the behavior. So the first phase of development is programs, put them in. And then, after age 7, we're engaged with consciousness where we can use those programs. Okay? So I say, so what's the relevance? And I say, the programs that come in the first 7 years are fundamentally subconscious. That's where the programs are. They're automatic. Are they evil? Everyone says subconscious is evil. I go, no. Hey, they're programs. I say, let me give you a good one. When did you learn how to walk? Oh, before you were 2. Are you still walking? Yeah. You could be 100. Are you still walking? I go, yeah. I say, guess what? That's from the program you got when you were 2. Do you drive a car? Have you been driving it for a while? Guess what? When the first day you got in a car, you were overwhelmed of everything you had to be conscious of. I said, today you get in the car, you put the key in the ignition and you're thinking about where you're
and listen to virologists and specialists and doctors who are not allowed into the mainstream media, doctors around the world in Germany and America and Austria, they are asking that question big time because they have not identified COVID-19. And so what's going on, I can elaborate on and how this all plays out and why people appear to be dying from it. But if people go to my website when they've watched this, davidicke.com, they'll find a video by a New York medical doctor, New York State medical doctor, now works in psychiatry, called Andrew Kaufman. And it's a absolutely brilliant breakdown of a crucial area of this story. He describes how when people started to fall ill in China, in Wuhan, they had about 200, I think it was up at 198 to start with. And they investigated 7 of them. And they did this by taking lung fluid. And they decided, with no evidence whatsoever, that the cause of their illness was a virus, which has been given the name COVID-19. But they never identified a virus from the lung fluid. They identified genetic material, which they coded. And they called it COVID-19, a virus. That genetic material is produced by a string of other possible causes, including lung cancer. So what they started doing, and this is what's happening to a large extent around the world still to this day, is they started to diagnose COVID-19, which they'd never identified and isolated, through symptoms. And you will notice that they are describing what are the symptoms of of COVID-19. Oh, they're flu-like symptoms. Yeah. The symptoms are the same as, again, a long list of other causes, including influenza, cold, etc., etc. But suddenly, instead of diagnosing them in their spectrum of possibility, anyone with those symptoms now had COVID-19, and it went down, they got COVID-19. So loads of people who had respiratory and other symptoms that would relate to flu-like symptoms, especially this year, in this time of the year, was now COVID-19. So the numbers started to fly, purely on redesignating all those symptoms from many possible causes as COVID-19, which they've never identified. The Chinese then, before they had any proof that it was a virus, or whatever it was causing those people to fall ill, they developed a test for it called a PCR test. Actually, it's an RT-PCR test. And this is what is being used to test people in America and all around the world now. And it is not testing for COVID-19. How can it? They've not identified it and isolated it. What it's testing for is this sequence of genetic material found in the lungs of these patients in China that has a long list of other possible causes, including lung cancer. And what Kaufman, and then of course what happens is that people are tested, they test positive for not the virus, but for this genetic material, and then now COVID-19. So you can see the numbers getting greater and greater and greater. And Kaufman then goes on to point out that when cells are toxic, when they are poisoned, what happens is they release, as part of the immune cleansing system, they release something called exosomes. This is all part of the natural body response system to toxicity in the cells. And without that, we'd be in real trouble. And these exosomes are also found in lung fluid, where this whole thing was supposed to come out of. What he then does is show you a picture of a exosome, and he shows you a picture of alleged COVID-19, and they are the same. COVID-19, what they're showing you on a slide, is actually exosomes, part of the body's natural detoxification system, which also comes into that genetic material.
Always good to see another
And
hero
so,
of the another hero.
whenever you have toxic cells, which can be caused by disease, they can be caused by stress and fear, be caused by toxins, they can be caused by electromagnetic fields, brackets 5G. When the cells become toxic, they release these exosomes as part of the response process. And then when you look at the list of characteristics of exosomes and so-called COVID-19, including the same very receptors on the cells that they lock into, they're exactly the same. And so what's happened is they have taken the toxic response system of the body, exosomes, and they've renamed it COVID-19. So when they do the test It's not for COVID-19, it's for the genetic material, and in that genetic material, you'll find exosomes. And therefore, we have a pandemic, it is claimed, by renaming a natural cellular response system COVID-19 that has destroyed the global economy on purpose. Been predicting it for ages in my books, and has created dependency on the state and authorities for billions of people. They have changed the world in a way it will never return to how it was before. And while people are locked away and their businesses are closed and the people that work for them are unemployed, the cult, which I've been exposing for 30 years, that's behind all this, that has no borders, it's a global web, has, through its multi-billionaires and its mega corporations, been buying up, and will continue to do so, businesses and resources, etc., on an absolute mega scale. And at the end of this process, this 1% will be fantastically more wealthy and have fantastically more control than they had before. About a week ago, there's an ultra-Zionist billionaire called Ackman in America. He made $2 billion betting on the catastrophe and what would happen as a result. This has allowed the very people, the very cult, the very networks that I have been exposing for 30 years to get the very control I've said for 30 years they're aiming to get. So, what is happening as it came out of China, but by the way, well, I'll come back to China in a minute. Let me say one other thing. As it came into the West, what was happening is that people in the medical profession were being told these are the symptoms of COVID-19. And still today, vastly, they are diagnosing COVID-19 from symptoms. So if you've got the flu, you have flu-like symptoms. If you've got a cold, you've got cold flu-like symptoms. But now, you're COVID-19. And so the numbers grow and grow. Oh, more cases, more cases, more cases. I'll have a question for your viewers if they're sitting there thinking, oh, this can't be true. They wouldn't lie to us that much. Oh, they would. How come, with all these people dying, it is said, from COVID-19, that the death numbers in Britain and Europe from all causes have not risen? Not risen in any way, shape or form to explain and to encompass the numbers of people dying from COVID-19. You know why? Because they're not. What's happening is they're being redesignated to have died from COVID-19. We have nurses and loved ones who are reporting over and over that what's happening is people are going into hospital with other things, and they're being tested for COVID-19. No, they're not. They're being tested for this genetic material. And if, for instance, they have lung cancer, this will test positive for that genetic material, and they'll be told they've got COVID-19. And what's happening is when they die from other causes, the death certificate is now saying they've died from COVID-19. 99%, this is official Italian government figures, 99% of people in Italy who have died from COVID-19 have had 1, 2, 3 or more other health problems, which they were in hospital for.
Zone B.
And this is why
That's a power play. That's a power play. Took them. Now hold.
journalists, proper journalists, members of the public in other words, have been going around hospitals in America and in Britain. Some guy's just been jailed in Britain for it. And they've been filming these war zone hospitals that you see in the media claimed, and they're empty. So why are they empty? They're empty because as a result of this virus hysteria, they have shut down all other operations. How many people are going to die as a result of that? They've shut down other consultations for people who are ill. How many are going to die because of that? And at the same time, that void of work has not been filled with COVID-19 patients because there is no COVID-19. And so, because they're claiming this is a deadly virus, and they can't produce the numbers of dead people to support that, they're simply redesignating people who die of other things to have died of COVID-19. I'll give you a quick example. 2 days ago, we had he was very famous at one time, when he was out of the business for quite a time. He was a comedian, a guy called Eddie Large. A lot of older people in Britain will know him. He went into hospital with heart failure. He's had a very bad heart for a while, apparently. He went into hospital with heart failure. And they tested him for COVID-19, this genetic material, not COVID-19, and they found that he tested positive. Because they're doing this with everyone who goes in hospital now. No matter what they do, fall down the stairs, you get COVID-19. And then he died. And they said that he basically died after contracting COVID-19. His very damaged heart that he went in hospital for, of course, played no part in the fact that he died. And there's a very, I don't know whether you got this in America, but in Britain and other ones that I've looked at, there you watch the language. Again and again and again, I am seeing this phrase in the media, so-and-so died, or this number have died, after testing positive for COVID-19. And those that test positive and die are then added to the numbers of people who died from COVID-19. Note what they're not saying. Note the language. They died after testing positive for COVID-19. Not they died of COVID-19. Something else. This test does not in any way register how much of any virus the person has. And we have these things in legion in our bodies. And they never trouble us, except very rarely, because they never reach what we call viral load, the point where there's so much of it, it makes people sick. And so they're not testing for the virus, and they're not testing on how much of a, quote, virus that a person has to test if their problem is caused by it. And they are redesignating people dying about COVID-19 where they didn't die from it. This is what's happening. And in Italy, the epicenter of it is an area called Lombardy. Lombardy has absolutely notorious toxic air. Some people call it the China of Europe. Again, China, Wuhan, toxic air, grotesque. So they have a lot of lung problems, and they have a lot of deaths.
That's a power play.
The last figures I saw, in 1 year, in the area of Lombardy in Italy, 100,000 people, 99,000 and several hundred, died in a year of all causes. The next area of Italy, in second place, was 57,000. So they have all this capacity for people who are dying in large numbers in that area. and they're redesignating them. And even people who are part of the, if you like, establishment in Italy are saying that the designation of COVID-19 to death is vastly overrated. So this is what's going on, and you see, I've been tracking and exposing this global network that's behind this for all these decades, and saying what they want to do and how they want to change the world and how they want to restructure it as a global fascistic dictatorship. And what's happened in literally a matter of a small number of weeks has given them every box to tick. And if people think that's a coincidence, then they need life membership of Naivety Anonymous.
Zone A lost.
So let's talk a little bit about those boxes to tick. It's very clear there's obviously a lot of uncertainties with regards to what they're discussing with COVID-19. I think that there's clearly some form of, whether it's just a very strong coronavirus or a very strong flu that's making people susceptible. That's my opinion. There's clearly a lot of, nobody seems to really have a clear answer with COVID-19. But
let me give you some information on that.
Okay. And then I want to talk about the boxes to tick and the larger macro and the economic ramifications.
There is a recurring theme which has been well documented in books. And that is, every time there has been a global epidemic pandemic of this type, going back to so-called Spanish flu in 1918 and Asian flu in the 50s and Hong Kong flu in the 60s, that epidemic has followed a major change in the electromagnetic pollution of the energetic field by a new level of technologically generated electromagnetic fields. They call it Spanish flu. Killed vast numbers of people, way more than even they're talking about with this. And it's called Spanish flu. It's not douchebag. And it wasn't really flu when you looked at the symptoms. People were dying because their blood wouldn't coagulate. Don't sound like flu to me. And two things happened in the immediate run-up to it. One, soldiers returning from the First World War were given large numbers of uncontrolled vaccines. Two, highly intense radar was introduced. Where did Spanish flu start? Madrid? No. On military bases in the United States, where this radar was going on and this vaccination had gone on. And then it started to appear in other places with the same common theme. And there's a guy who's investigated this, and he has written a book about it some years ago now, 2017, I think. And in 2018, he said something which is incredibly relevant now. He said, every time there has been a major change in the technological radiation pollution of the Earth, my words summarizing his statement, what has followed has been very significant effects on health. He said that in 2018. What's happened in the months preceding this outbreak? The introduction of 5G. What does 5G do? It's electromagnetic frequencies are enormously more powerful than anything we've faced before. Make cells toxic. So what do they produce? Well, they produce sickness, toxic cells, and they produce exosomes in response to it, which has been renamed COVID-19. And you know, in Britain, I did a video, it's on my website now, about the connection between 5G and this so-called virus. We have an organisation in Britain, it's a government agency, it's called Ofcom, Office of Communications, and it's basically the watchdog, bracket censor, of British broadcasting. They have said to British broadcasters, including the BBC, all of them, that they will impose sanctions and consequences if they allow any discussion on their stations of a possible connection between COVID-19 and 5G. So obviously there's a connection, because you're not going to do that otherwise. And what has been happening while this virus has been, hysteria has been underway, is they have been rolling out all over the world, not least in this country, while people have been locked down. They have been rolling out more and more and more 5G tower, 5G antennas down the street. And people have been seeing them. It's on social media. There's another 5G going up. In the same period, Elon Musk, who is a psychopath, by the way, who must know what he's doing, is putting up, he wants, eventually, it's going up all the time, through this SpaceX front, 42,000 satellites beaming this stuff at the Earth. And about a week ago, he was given permission by the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC. That's just a front for this cult and the telecommunications industry. That's why 5G's been rolled out without any testing whatsoever. He was given permission to put into place, install in America, 1 million ground-based antenna to interact and communicate with these 5G satellites. And what is happening, another 21 towns and cities have been open for 5G in Britain while this virus has been going. And the more they expand 5G, which is why they're trying to do it as fast as possible, the more people are going to get sick, and the more people are going to test for exosomes renamed COVID-19. This is what's going on. And because they control the numbers, because they're making them up, they can keep this rising for as long as they want, and they can stop it when they choose, simply by redesignating and counting the numbers in a different way and diagnosing it a different way. Which brings me just very briefly to this. You notice something? We had a situation in China which was apparently catastrophic. They were building new hospitals, right, in a matter of a week or 2 weeks. Because what was happening is the rest of the world was being given something to be terrified of if it came their way, which was always the plan. In virtually no time, the lockdown's ending in China. Flights are restarting. Industries restarting. How on earth? These new hospitals are empty and closed. How can you go from that mass hysteria in China to boom in no time? How can it happen? You stop diagnosing in the same way you did before, and you stop counting the numbers in the way you did before, thus the numbers disappear. It's about numbers. It's not about health. It's about numbers. It's about manipulating numbers, and it's about using this to destroy the independent income of billions, to make them dependent on the state. And it's about justifying massive, fascistic, global Orwellian control of the global population. That's what this is about. Nothing to do with health.
Zone C captured. That's a power play. That's a power play. You took them. Now hold them. Now hold them.
Thanks for listening to Spotify. No, really. You could have listened to the radio. You could have spun some vinyl. You could have played a cassette tape. You could have listened to an 8-track tape. If you knew what an 8-track tape looked like. But you listened to Spotify. Thanks for that. And you still have hundreds more playlists to enjoy.
Times of pandemonium, we turn to David Icke. He's been for decades predicting the tiptoe towards totalitarianism. Now we have pandemic, tidal wave totalitarianism. We have been locked down overnight. Disclaimer before we let David get on with it. Unlike Dr. John Campbell, neither of us are medical experts. We are activists with a twist of English wit and entertainment. My belief is in Tolstoy's quote, the highest flight of wisdom is to admit we know nothing. We are trying to examine this from every angle. I've had a variety of guests on. One guy said it was from the bats. I got called a deep state shill. Another guy said it was from the virus released from the weapons lab. I was called a crackpot conspiracy theorist. So if you are so dogmatic, you cannot look at somebody else's viewpoint, you shouldn't be on this channel. What David is about to say, some people are going to be dancing in the living room, they're going to love it. Some people are going to be upset and perhaps offended because people are dying. So, without any further ado, we've got Bill Gates just did his new TED Talk talking about the whole world needs to be tracked. They've got to have some form of identification, so whether they've been vaccinated or whether they've not been vaccinated or whether they had the virus or not, maybe by ID card or by microchip. We've got Event 201 to discuss. We've got the weapons, the bio lab potential leak of purposeful. And now trillions, I just spoke to Joel Skousen, he said trillions have now been handed over to the bankers. So, did you see the TED Talk by Bill Gates, David? And thanks for coming back on.
Now hold.
Thanks, Sean. The problem is not the dearth of medical expertise among the population. The problem is the dearth, from what I can see, non-existence of medical expertise advising the government and the governments of the world. Wherever you look, you are seeing the same script playing out in country after country, culture after culture, because it's a global script and it's being played out by the global cult that has no borders that I've been exposing for 30 years. And if there are still people out there, and there will still be loads of them, who despite how they're being beyond belief scammed over this, quote, virus, if they can't see that the world is heading in a certain direction towards a global, fascistic, Orwellian state, now, after all this, well, there's no hope for them. And, you know, we got into this mess because of what I call press enter people. They're software programs. They have no capacity for free thought. So the data goes in, there's a virus, we're all gonna die. And they press enter, and the software program responds to data.
Don't be lost.
So not only does it sit in its house, not going out in the sunshine, not even away from people, it insists that those who know it's a load of bollocks concede their freedom in the same way they have.
1 minute.
To the extent that we even have some people snitching on neighbours for going outside for a second time in the day. Now, and the police, of course, have set up hotlines so they can do that. Oh, the point is this. I've been saying this for so long. Freedom is so unbelievably tenuous.
30
And
seconds remain.
it depends
I could not ask for a
not
better
even primarily on the people seeking to delete that freedom. It depends on the idiots who refuse to engage their right to free thought and insist on not only acquiescing to the demands of the few, but insisting that everyone else does that. You see, I've said so many times, a few people cannot control the world without the acquiescence and active participation of the target population. And you can't get a better example than, hey, is that the police? My neighbour's just gone out in the garden for the second time. You know, well, who are you? Oh, I'm a brain-doning freaking idiot.